If you have a true, strange, or scary story you'd like to share with the channel, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I have always enjoyed and even preferred hiking solo. You didn't have to stop for someone else or speed up for them. You could go at your own pace and truly have your own experience. But then I went on one of these hikes that now has me hesitating before I trust people. I had planned a small hiking trip somewhere that I hadn't been, in a smaller state park in Iowa. I was planning on getting through it within 2 days, and by the route I had planned out, it was doable. I was going to stop about halfway through, maybe even 2/3 of it, set up for the night, and then finish the next day. I usually kept my load pretty light with only the necessities. I brought along a sleeping bag and a hammock, hoping to find a nice set of trees. The hammock was my favorite way to sleep, getting to gaze at the stars until I drifted off. I arrived on Friday afternoon in late July. As I was doing one last check on my supplies and adjusting the tightness on my boots, a man approached me wearing the normal ranger uniform you might expect. He was probably about mid-40s, wearing khakis and a dark green shirt with a matching hat, and a small scarf tied around his neck. He also had a badge pinned to his shirt that said Chuck. He had some stubble on his chin and either had really short hair or was bald, because I couldn't see any with his hat on. He nodded and asked me if it was my first time here, and I confirmed. He seemed to be thrilled by this, and began asking me questions about what I was looking for or hoped to get out of the trip. I explained that I was just doing some hiking alone, and just wanted to see what all the park had to offer. Chuck was very clearly passionate about his job. He immediately pointed out some of the best trails to take, and even some of the off-the-path ones to get some of the best scenic views. Before I knew it, he was walking alongside me, and we were chatting about different parks and forests we'd visited in the past. We had been walking and chatting for a good portion of the trail, until I decided to take a trail that had a steep incline. Chuck had pointed it out to me, and suggested that I check it out, then said he had to stay near the base. I thanked him, and we parted ways. I took the trail and quickly understood why it was rarely taken. The trail started as just dirt and grass, but the higher I went, the more it turned to loose rock and dirt, which became a bit more hard to walk on. But the view at the end was absolutely worth it. There was a small ledge that overlooked the lake, and the reflection on the water was just breathtaking. I stood there taking it all in for several minutes before I finally walked away. I then walked back down the trail and continued on my path until I could tell that I needed to rest. The sun was starting to set, so I decided to stop and set up for the night. After walking around the trees, I finally found a set and tied up my hammock. As I lay there staring up at the trees and sky, I started thinking about all I had seen that day. I thought about the view on the inclined trail, and it made me want to see the same with the moon. I wanted to get that contrasting view of day versus night. It wasn't going to be the exact same view because I would have to walk back quite a bit, but I knew if I walked a little to the west, I would find the lake again, and get to see a similar view. I kept my bag and hammock where it was, and just took my camera and headlamp with me. I walked through the trees, and the chill in the air confirmed that I was getting close. But I was apparently not alone in my thoughts. As I got closer, I saw someone standing near the edge of the lake. But as soon as I saw the scarf around the neck, I knew it was Chuck. He had his back to me, arms to his side, staring out at the lake. His shirt was unbuttoned and waving in the slight breeze. I didn't want to startle him, so I just called out to him. "Hey, Chuck, You were right about that view." Chuck did not move. He didn't even budge or turn around when I spoke. I thought maybe he didn't hear me. Maybe he had bad hearing or possibly even had earbuds in that I couldn't see. If so, I still did not want to startle him, so I thought I would make a wide circle around him until I was within his view to spot me. As I started walking to his left, I noticed Chuck finally start moving. But all he turned was his head. Something was off about the way he moved. His head slowly turned to the left, but he kept turning it almost unnaturally. It was like he was really struggling to turn it when it wouldn't turn anymore. Like you're trying to look at something behind you that's just out of view. And once his head was turned as far as it could, he then slowly moved his torso to match the direction of his head. But again, it was just his torso. His legs stayed in an A form while his torso now slowly moved. It was uncanny and unnatural and just creepy. Why didn't he just move his whole body to look behind him? I stopped in place as I watched him turn like that, and then he leaned his head to the side and stayed in that position for several seconds. He was really freaking me out, and I was about to back away back to my camp when he finally spoke. He flashed a very wide grin that looked nothing like the friendly smile I got at the entrance. And then he said in a mimicking tone, "Hey Chuck, you were right about the view." He literally just repeated what I said. It was definitely his voice, but he just repeated me. Why? Why would he just repeat what I was saying? Why was he being so creepy, and what was he even doing out here in this exact spot? Something was not right, and I was not about to stick around to find out. So I made a mad dash back to my stuff, looking back every once in a while to make sure he wasn't following me. I didn't really sleep that night either. I was too paranoid that he would come find me. I don't know if he would have done anything, but he was already being creepy, so I wasn't going to take my chances. It was also way too dark in those woods, and I didn't think it would be any safer to walk around with all my stuff, so I just stayed where I was. The next morning, I finished the rest of the trek without any run-ins with Chuck. I unfortunately didn't get to enjoy most of it because I was looking around for him, so I'm glad that I got to experience what I did the day leading up to that night. When I got to the entrance, I thought about finding another ranger and telling them about it, but I was also worried about how they would take it. Yeah, one of your rangers was in the woods turning weird and copying what I said. It's not like he physically did anything, so what could they even do? I just decided to keep it to myself and left. And I haven't returned to that park again. I've told some people I'm close to and posted this in other places, and the consensus is that he was probably just trying to mess with me, or maybe there was something messed up with him upstairs. Either way, it left a lasting impression on me, one that I don't care for, and once again, has confirmed that I would rather do these things solo. But maybe a camcorder or a GoPro wouldn't be such a bad idea to take with me. Hi, I'm Star. This story sounds like a nightmare, and I wish it was. For a bit of context, me and my boyfriend, we've been dating for 4-ish years now, live together and like to camp on weekends. Also, I have diagnosed schizophrenia, but I was on meds the whole time. My boyfriend does not have schizophrenia, and he experienced everything that I did too. Lately, due to work, we haven't been able to do much, but we finally got a gap to do so, and we jumped on the chance almost immediately. We decided to pick a campground in the mountains near us, about an hour and a half away, and an hour from any roads or people. Now, looking back, we should have seen some warning signs due to there being no one else booked there near the end of August. We didn't think anything of it, and just got our permits to camp there. The next day, we were all packed up and in the car. I had one of my stuffies/plushies with me. I take it with me whenever I can because it brings me comfort. I have trauma from a lot of stuff from when I was a kid, and this plushie somehow gives off a calming aura to me. Anyway, we got there and set up a few hours before nightfall, and everything was okay. We were going to stay there for 4 nights. We brought 2 sleeping bags and a 2-person tent, as well as some other camping gear. We got everything set up and were making dessert when the first weird thing happened. One of our apple pie things just wasn't in the coals anymore. It's possible that we couldn't find the little ball of tinfoil that it was all wrapped up in, but it was right next to the other one, and that one was there. It's strange, but we both laughed it off and made another. We put out the fire and cleaned everything up so no bears would attack us or eat our food. It's happened before, and it's not pretty. We got into the tent and set up the sleeping bags. I got the plushie from the car. For context, it's a 4-foot, or 1.22 meters in non-freedom units, axolotl pillow/plushie. It was odd trying to sleep. I couldn't fall asleep even holding the plushie close. I couldn't get the feeling of being watched out of my mind. It wasn't my boyfriend because it was around 3 a.m. and he was asleep, holding me close to his chest. After another half hour, I realized that the calming aura that my plushie and boyfriend usually gave off was gone. Just vanished. This hasn't happened in the 4 years I've been dating my boyfriend and having the plushie. I woke up my boyfriend to tell him this, and he just looked at me confused. He never really understood what I meant about the calming feeling that I get from them. He just held me closer and hummed softly while I held on to the plushie tighter. Eventually, I did fall asleep. In the morning, when I got up, before my boyfriend, I was in the exact same position that I fell asleep in, but the plushie wasn't in my arms. In fact, it wasn't anywhere in the tent. It was right outside the tent. This was odd because I didn't wake up, and much less, I would never leave Axel, the plushie, yes, I gave him a name, outside like that. He could get stolen or taken by a wild animal. Everything was normal through the day and even during our hike. The only odd thing is that we didn't see any wildlife or hear any at all. Odd, but again, we just played it off. The next 2 nights and their days were normal as well. As normal as it could be. Again, though, there was no wildlife, only the birds circling the woods above us. The final night was off, to say the least. We both felt like we were being watched, and there was an unfriendly presence in those woods. We kept hearing a person, not an animal, but a person or something human-like, walking around, scratching the tent, snapping branches. Suddenly, it all stopped. The feeling of being watched went away, and that presence also went away. I was crying, and my boyfriend was shaking, scared. That was odd because it takes a lot to scare him. We both didn't sleep, and when we got up in the morning, we packed up as fast as we could and left. When we were packing up, there was a pile of snapped branches in piles of 10 to 20 sticks, and they were in a triangular pattern if you connected the dots. When we got home, that calming aura/presence of my boyfriend and plushie were instantly back, and a little overwhelming. I'm just glad that we were back home safe and unharmed. I'm sorry if this isn't clear or doesn't sound real, but it did happen. And we were both a little shaken from it almost a few weeks later. Last summer, right after I finished my junior year of college, my girlfriend Nikki and I decided to take a camping trip with another couple, our friends Lisa and Jason. We were planning on staying for the weekend to just eat, drink, talk, and have fun. I'd been there multiple times in the past with not only my family as a kid, but my girlfriend and I had been there together too. Lisa and Jason were also very familiar with the area, so it wasn't going to be anything new for any of us. This gave us a chance to still enjoy our surroundings and appreciate nature, but we could also focus more on our time together and just enjoy each other's company. Once we arrived, we signed the logbook, and the ranger reminded us to stick to the marked paths and be mindful of the wildlife. We nodded in agreement and walked off. We were always respectful of the wildlife. Jason and I were not hunters, and even if we were, I think the girls would have taken us out if we tried anything. But as for the trails, sometimes we liked to push it to see things you are likely to miss if you stayed on the designated ones. After some walking, Nikki spotted an almost perfectly smooth and almost circular spot that she thought would be a good place to stop. I was hoping to go a little further into the woods, but I was outnumbered and we set up camp there. We all discussed if we would leave our tents there and continue to explore, or if we should pack up and set up again further along. After hiking and pitching tents, we worked up an appetite and settled into our hot meal. We brought a small cooler big enough to carry that held some brats and condiments to enjoy for the night. We sat around our small fire, enjoyed the slight breeze, and talked until we were too tired to continue. We went into our tents and settled in for the night until we drifted off. But the next day was when things started to get weird. I woke to switch sides, but I couldn't fall back asleep. It was probably around 5 or 6 in the morning. The sun was just starting to come up, but it was still pretty dark deep in the trees. As I lay there, trying to sleep just a little bit longer, I started hearing whispering. I couldn't make out what was being said, but I assumed it was Jason and Lisa trying not to wake us up. I could not fall back asleep, no matter what I did, so I decided to just get up and let Nikki sleep a little longer. But when I got out of the tent, Jason and Lisa were nowhere around, and their tent was still zipped up. I assumed that they were still asleep and that maybe I just heard the wind. I sat on the ground by our makeshift fire pit, now completely out, and rubbed my eyes, trying to get myself to wake up and focus. While I sat in silence staring out into the trees, that's when I realized that it was silent. We were in the woods. Being this early, there's usually crickets chirping or birds singing, or maybe even an owl hoot. But there was nothing. Not even the sound of wind blowing between the tree branches. I stayed seated and looked around the area, trying to see if I could spot anything. Was there a predator in the area? Was that why? Was there a bad storm coming in? But I saw and felt nothing. Everything looked normal. Then, I heard the whispering again. It was so faint that I almost missed it. I held still and tried to discern where it was coming from, but I could not pinpoint it. It was like it was circling me. How was that even possible? Once again, I couldn't make out what was being said, but I knew that it was whispering. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It actually sounded like a person whispering, but they were so fast that I couldn't make out the words. I called out, "Hello?" to see if there was someone nearby. Maybe they saw our tents and didn't want to disturb us. Maybe they were not all there, and that's why they were whispering in the first place. The whispering seemed to stop like it heard me, but then I heard tree branches breaking, like someone was walking over them. But just as soon as that started, the whispering started up again too. This had to be a person, right? They stopped like they heard me and then continued. So where were they? And what were they doing? I stood up and started looking around more, and suddenly I started getting the feeling of being watched. You know when you're on your phone or computer and you can just feel someone watching you? So you look over and the little kid at the coffee shop is staring at your screen? Yeah, that feeling. Minus the annoyance, since I'm out in the woods. It's more paranoid than annoyed. I stood in place and looked around, trying to again determine where it was coming from. I walked towards the tree lines, but as I walked to the trees behind our tent openings, I started getting this sense of dread. Something told me to not go any further. But yet all I heard still was the whispering. I was honestly ready to get the hell out of that area. I went back to the tent to wake up Nikki, so we could at least start getting our stuff packed. We didn't normally set alarms for ourselves when we went out here, but we were typically pretty good at naturally waking up around this time. So, it was pretty weird to me that no one else had woken up yet. I went into our tent, woke up Nikki, and started picking everything else up. The whole time I was doing this, I could still hear the whispering. While she was in the tent changing, I felt a hefty blow of wind, and then like a switch, the birds and crickets started up. I assumed that Nikki saw the look on my face and asked me what was wrong. She looked at me perplexed as I explained what I had just experienced. She didn't hear any of the whispering, and said she also didn't notice anything strange with the birds or the crickets. Shortly after, I heard our friend's tent open, and Lisa came out, looking around. She asked where Jason was. I never saw him leave. I thought he was still in the tent. That meant that he had to be out of the tent prior to me leaving mine, and was out here the entire time, but where did he go? I thought maybe he went to relieve himself, so I just shouted for him and told Lisa to get dressed, so we could at least start getting ready to leave. As I broke down our tent, I heard someone walking and turned to see Jason coming out of the trees on my right. The look on his face made me think that he heard or saw something that didn't make sense either. He nodded at me, went to Lisa and said something to her, and then came over to me. He explained that he had woken up needing to use the bathroom, but while he was out there, he too heard the whispering. He thought someone may have just been screwing with him, so he started following it. He explained how it seemed to lead to nowhere, and that it didn't seem to be getting any louder or quieter. That's when he also started getting the feeling like he was being watched. That's what made him go back to our camp. He was feeling the fight or flight and wanted to get back to us to make sure that we were okay and to get the hell out of there. I told him what I experienced and explained how Nikki didn't seem to hear the whispering either. None of us had any explanation as to what we did and didn't experience, but Jason and I had the sense that it wasn't good. We quickly left and moved on, much further into the woods. We found another place to stay in those same woods, to stay for the next night, and we all shared our experiences. And that's when we learned that Lisa had been awake since she heard me say hello. However, she also didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. No silence, and no whispering. So how was it that Jason and I were the only ones that heard it? And what was watching us that made us feel like we were in danger? I won't lie, it took me a while to finally fall asleep that night, and I woke up early again, but this time there was nothing off. I woke up to crickets, and there was no whispering. Same with Jason. We finished the rest of our trip with no further weird events, but it was burned into my memory. We had been there many times prior to that trip, and never experienced anything like that. We've also gone back since then, just Nikki and I for a day trip, and with the others, and still it hasn't happened again. Even though it freaked us the hell out, I'm glad that it didn't do anything to us, and that it didn't stick around. Hey Raven, great channel, one of the best. Thank you. During lockdown, I got involved in spirituality. dabbling in all sorts of traditions, and most I let go of afterward. One thing I kept going with was a regular outing in the woods near my home that I had previously never really bothered with. I never consider myself to be a nature person, other than looking at beautiful scenery pictures. I really didn't care for it. Bugs have always irritated me, and I didn't like being outside. That was until being cooped up inside for months on end came around, and then I had a change of heart. I got to get out of the house without having to deal with large amounts of people. I became more observant and learned what was normal for the forest, what kind of trees tended to grow where, even if I didn't know their names. I started to notice smaller differences. Some bark would only grow on some of the trees and not others. How there were occasionally stone circles or fallen trees. And I would wonder if it was the power of nature, who would place it there and why, and if it had any particular meaning. I walked down to the creek, nearly, watching the water flow by, and it was rare for me to be disturbed by anybody. You know how birds would go quiet, or you'd have the hair stand on the back of your neck? And that didn't happen. The shrubs near the waterline began to move against the wind, and I thought it was an animal. A deer came out and made its way toward the rest of the herd. I noticed a few deer nearby. They were grazing and would look in my direction. I didn't bother them, and they didn't bother me. I sat down on a rock, my usual spot that I would always spend time at. I closed my eyes and took a moment to relax before I started meditating. Judging by my watch after the event, what happened didn't take that long. I heard a weird, bellowing sound. I ignored it until I heard the same sound again. One thing that initially unsettled me was the strange sounds that animals would make. I opened my eyes when I heard the deer running through the forest, and looked around to see what had startled them. I couldn't help but let out a tiny giggle at my reaction, until I saw a lone deer walking through. There were some strange growths over its body, and it was moving weird. Like it was stiff, but somehow erratic, with sharp movements. I stood up and stared at it. It started walking in circles in the water, making that strange bellowing sound that scared me. I stepped backwards, unsure of who to report this to, and not knowing what to do. But I figured it was best to leave. A branch snapped whenever I stepped backward. I know, kind of cheesy, but that's what happened. The weird deer stopped still and looked in my direction. There was something about its vacant eyes that scared me. It didn't feel normal. I remember its sides were moving in and out as if it was breathing really heavily. Its head kind of flopped around while it did so. I don't know if I had been watching too many movies or TikToks, but it looked as though this thing was going to stand up on its hind legs. Finally, it started making several steps in my direction. I had actually heard about walkers taking the form of animals in order to get close to people. Maybe that's why the other deer ran away when it got close, because they knew what it was. Or maybe it could have been something else that was weirdly supernatural. I'm not afraid to say that I was too scared to stay there. I screamed, turned, and ran as fast as I could back home. What was relaxing for me had turned into an incredibly stressful experience, and I didn't want to ever relive that again. I haven't gone back to that creek since, or even that forest. I still do go for walks around my area, but not into the woods themselves. I was browsing YouTube Shorts, and a video of an infected deer came up. Some of them looked similar to what I saw. I heard that there was a fungus or a parasite that can affect deer like this. Or maybe it was something supernatural. I did report it to wildlife services, but I haven't heard anything back. If the deer was sick, then I hope that they could help it. Who knows? Maybe it could have been rabies or something. I don't know, Raven. Maybe your listeners can help me work out what that thing could have been. Hello, Raven. I love your content and your channel. Here is my story about, well, something. Me, my dad, and my brother named Jack were camping, and we went there and got greeted by an old guy who was in his 70s or 80s, and he told us that he hid toys and marbles by a creek that runs down the campsite. My brother got super excited about this because, at the time, we were little kids. I really didn't care all too much, but when he told us, it was between 9 p.m. and 12 a.m., when it would be pitch black and creepy. My dad asked if he could set it at an earlier time, and the old guy flipped out. He gave us a card and just ran away. When me and my dad set up the tent, it was like 7 p.m., and Jack wondered if we could go check out the toy scavenger hunt. So, we did. The old guy was in an old lawn chair, just smiling at everyone, finding tiny army figures and shiny rocks. Jack ran and I chased him, and he found a Spider-Man action figure. My dad put 2 big thumbs up, and we ran around trying to find toys. 2 hours pass, and we're cooking s'mores, and we hear an animal, and we then found a big elk. It looked cool until it walked toward us. My dad told us to go in the tent, but the elk just wanted some food. We decided to call it quits for the night and go to sleep. I then woke up to crunching outside of our tent, so I thought it was just the elk that we saw earlier, but no. It was the old man walking around at least midnight. I woke up my dad and he got protection ready while I kept my brother quiet. He ended up disappearing that night and went missing. As I get older, I remind myself of how stupid that was. Going to that old man's party? If it was in a house, like a house party, it would be normal. Like an old man just spreading joy around to his neighbors. But in the middle of the woods with no cell service? It was just crazy. I was a park ranger in Frederick, Maryland, dutifully patrolling the state park one fateful night. The air was crisp and the forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. As I made my rounds, I stumbled upon a heart-wrenching sight. A black bear, grievously injured, likely struck by an elk. The bear was in agony, its labored breaths echoing through the stillness. With a heavy heart, I knew what had to be done. I raised my gun and with a single shot, ended its suffering. I radioed in the incident, my voice trembling slightly as I relayed the details. Suddenly, a deep guttural howl pierced the night, sending shivers down my spine. It was close, no more than 100 feet away. My eyes scanned the darkness and then I saw it. A hulking figure moving towards the dead bear. As it came into view, my blood ran cold. This creature stood upright, towering at least 6 to 7 feet tall. Its body was a grotesque blend of a wolf's head and the muscular frame of a bodybuilder, covered in jet black fur. Its eyes were a menacing red and I was paralyzed with fear, my gun useless in my now trembling hands. The beast approached the bear's carcass and began to devour it with a ferocity that was both horrifying and mesmerizing. I estimated that the bear would be completely consumed within 2 hours at the rate it was going. Slowly, I regained my composure and began to back away, inching towards my golf cart. Just as I thought I was safe, something heavy struck the seat beside me, the bear's head. I started the cart and sped away, the creature howling echoing behind me. I didn't stop until I was far from the park with my heart pounding in my chest. The next morning I handed in my resignation. As I write this, I can't help but wonder why the creature threw the head at me. Was it some kind of warning? A message that I was lucky the bear was there, or I would have been its next meal? I now believe that we have an alpha male werewolf lurking in the woods of Maryland. I was always a skeptic of cryptids, but that night changed everything. So that, my friends, was a collection of In the Woods horror stories. Scary, creepy, strange, in the woods stories. However you want to title it, that's what we'll title it. That's false. I'm not going to rename the video just because someone says it should be titled this. But I'm going to let you believe I will. Does that sound good? Okay. Anyways, in the woods stories, scary stories, in the woods, camping, hiking. That's it in this case. But still, my point stands. It's in the woods. Camping and hiking stories also. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. Scary stories, not in civilization. Way out in the woods. Creepy, creepy. There you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this collection of stories. I did. If you did enjoy them, please consider hitting that like button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Plenty going on here in October, I promise you that. You can also leave me a comment down below with your thoughts on the video, on the stories, on me, whatever. If you feel bold and would like to support the channel further, you can go to Patreon or hit the join button below the video and sign up. You can get early access to videos like this. Yeah. Also, still selling signed and numbered posters at the Ko-fi link, that's K-O-F-I, down below the video, possibly in the pinned comment. I'm gonna annoy you guys with that in the pinned comment, probably, but is what it is. Trying to get rid of them, trying to sell them. They are limited prints, limited to around 45, so, yeah. Don't think I'll be reprinting them. So, get in now while the getting's good. Yeah. What else? Super thanks, just tips to the channel. You can also listen on Spotify, Audible, etc. I'm over there if you want to listen over there. I think that's about it. Yeah, hopefully you're having a good day. Hopefully you're having a great week. Hopefully I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember that you are loved. You are valid. You are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.